I'm not teaching, I am publicly learning. But hi and welcome to Learning for the Life in the UK test part 295, the cabinet, while doing Pilatic leg training. And if you participate in the Pilatic leg training, it's at your own risk. With that, we're starting. The first exercise, the Shishio-doshi. We're bringing one leg out with a flexed foot, and we're bringing it down, tapping onto the floor, and bringing it up again. So the cabinet. The Prime Minister appoints about 20 senior MPs to become ministers in charge of departments. So around 20 people are then chosen by the Prime Minister, and they are becoming then, they're having then a department to lead. And they are senior MPs. How does one become that? Does it mean they're at least 5 years there or something like that? Whatever. So there are 20 people picked by the Prime Minister, and they're having then different types of departments. For example, Chancellor of the Exchequer. That is the same word as for here, the Exchequer. So the Prime Minister has a country house, and that is the Exchequer. And I have no idea how it's pronounced. And now we're having someone who is the Chancellor of the Exchequer. And that means that that person is responsible for the economy. And we're changing the leg. The other leg out with a flex foot, and we're bringing it up and again down. So there are different departments, and these are, for example, then the one who is responsible for the economy, and the name is then Chancellor of the Exchequer. So someone is appointed by the Prime Minister to be the Chancellor of the Exchequer. And someone is appointed to be the Home Secretary, and that person is responsible for crime, policing, and immigration. The Home Secretary. Home Secretary, responsible for crime, policing, and immigration. And then there's the Foreign Secretary, and that person is responsible for managing relationships with foreign countries. So the Home Secretary cares for the crime and the policing and the immigration of a country, and the Foreign Secretary is responsible for managing how Britain works for other countries. And the Chancellor of the Exchequer looks after the economy of the country. And then there are other ministers called Secretaries of State, responsible for subjects such as education, health, and defense. There a bit. We're going back to the welfare state part. There was someone, it was A.A. Butler, Richard Austin Butler, I think, who was Chancellor of Education, and here Margaret Thatcher was also something. I think it was also education. And the next exercise, the leg out with the flex foot, and we're bending it at the knee. So they are then selected by the Prime Minister 20 people, senior MPs. So there are 20 senior MPs, so some ways are a member of Parliament, but they're a little bit longer there or something like that. And the Prime Minister chooses 20 of them, and one becomes the Chancellor of the Exchequer, one the Home Secretary, one the Foreign Secretary, and also many other people are becoming Secretary of State for Education or something like that, Secretary of State for Health, and so on, or Defense. And these ministers form the Cabinet, which is a committee which usually meets weekly and makes important decisions about government policy. So these 20 people around, and so it's Minister for the Learning and the Minister for the Police and of Immigration and so on, they're all coming then together once a week or so, and when they're talking and debating, and they are making then important decisions about the governmental policy. We're changing the leg. So we're all coming together, and one talks about we need more police, and the other one says let's not do that, and then the other person says we need more health. How we are working together if we have two completely different subjects. Whatever. 20 people are meeting, selected by the Prime Minister around once a week, and we're even talking how the whole government should work the next week, or a bit longer. And many of these decisions have to be debated or approved by Parliament. What decisions could 20 people sitting together make when they're just talking, which then have to be approved by the Parliament? Whatever, what we will decide might gonna be debated in the Parliament. Not everyone in the Parliament likes it. For example, the opposition. We have the job to scrutinize and to comment or something like that on what the government is doing. And sometimes we also have to get the approval for something. What the cabinet is talking. So it's 20 people elected by the prime minister. Now the hammerhead shark exercise. We're having again a long leg out with a bended knee. We're bending the knee. With a bended knee, we're bending the knee with a flex foot, and we're bringing it up and down. So we're having a leg out with a bended knee, and we're bringing it up and down. Let a flex foot. Each department also has a number of other ministers. What department? Other ministers responsible for subjects. So there are 20 senior MPs selected to become ministers in charge of departments. So there's then the Secretary of State for Education. And each department also has a number of other ministers called Ministers of State and Parliamentary under Secretaries of State. Is that the name? Printed in other letters, or make something so that we know which is the name. Are called Ministers of State and Parliamentary under Secretaries of State, or just Ministers of State and Parliamentary. No, the under is uppercase, so the under is part of the word. We're changing the name. So the whole name is Ministers of State and Parliamentary under Secretaries of State. Should we look what happens if we take out of the first letters and make an acronym? So every one of these departments, which is led then by a Secretary of State of something, Secretary of State of Education, there are then multiple ministers. And these are the Ministers of State and Parliamentary under Secretaries of State. What is the title? Are called Ministers of State and Parliamentary under Secretaries of State. Why and? I am the Ministers of State. Why of State? I am the ministers. Okay, that's plural, so just mirror. So it would mean I am the Minister of State and Parliamentary under Secretary of State. I'm the Minister of State and Parliamentary under Secretary of State. Why not? Next exercise, one leg long out and we bring it to the side and the leg to the outside. Okay, so there's the Prime Minister. He's the leader of a political party which had won the last general election. And he then goes through all the people and picks 20 of them. And every one of them gets a job to be secretary of something. Or it's a home front, what is it here? Home secretary, foreign secretary, or chancellor of exchequer. So 20 people are then picked by the prime minister. And they're getting all the big job at the department. And they're leading then that department. They are then secretary of state of the Department of Education or the Department of Health. Now each one of these departments then has multiple ministers. And they are called Ministers of State and Parliamentary under Secretaries of State, who take charge of particular areas of the department's work. Now the other leg of it, which was in a way obvious, who take charge of particular areas of the department's work. So there is then the Department for Education, and there's been one minister just there for the primary school and another one just for the secondary school. I guess something like that. So that's it. That's the cabinet. And now where we have a cabinet, we're not going to do anything new. If you're here for the opposition, then you can go directly to the next part. Otherwise, we will continue with something which we already had and now trying to learn a bit better. But before we're doing that, we're changing the exercise. One leg along out, we're tapping onto the floor, we're going to the outside and tapping again onto the floor. Okay, we wanted to remember the 6 things which the Chartists in the 1830s and 40s demanded. These were that every man, every year, and every region has the right to secretly vote and be voted for, and that can get paid. And now we could use the time now for the welfare state here. So it was honoring Nai Bivan. Harold Macmillan did the speech, the Wind of Change speech. Let's be just here for the Minister of Health. Who was it? Minister of Health? Was he not the Minister of Health or the Secretary of State for Health or something like that? The Minister of Health. It was Honoring Nai Bivan in 1948. He established the National Health Service. We're changing the leg. Honoring Nai Bivan. How can we remember that? A and B is not bad. Just to remember A and B. A and B. Enerin nai bevan. I don't know how the word be pronounced. Enerin nai bevan. Whatever, we are preparing now to do a 4.5 minutes plank, and we're starting in 4 seconds. So, and now we are starting the 4.5 minute long plank, and be rather too high with a back or too low and tuck the tape on it. With a Belfast state. Enerin nai bevan. Enerin nai bevan. Maybe I just repeated 50 times and then you know it. Enerin nai bevan. In 1948 he established the National Health Service, NHS. Okay, that's the first thing. The next thing. What do we else have? The Barrett report, done by William Barrett. That is important. He made a report called Social Insurance and Allied Services or something like that. That is not so important. With 5 giant evils, that's it. That is a good thing always to learn. So, evil has to be fought. Evil is the first thing to be fought. And one of the 5 things is now want, disease, ignorance, squalor, and idleness. Want, disease, ignorance, idleness, and squalor. Want, disease, idleness, ignorance, and squalor. Ignorance. But it goes quite good. The 4th finger works a little different because the 3rd and 4th finger are so connected. I gotta use the time to explain why. The thumb has 2 arm tendons, the pollicis brevis and the pollicis longus. That's why it's so movable. The index finger has the indices, also another tendon, additional to the extension to the toe. And the pinky finger has the its own tendon. And these 2, they don't have their own tendon. They just have, like these 4 fingers, the extension to the toe. So these 2 fingers, the 3rd and 4th, they don't have their own tendon. And that's why they are not so movable. The first is very movable, has 2, but no extension to the toe. Maybe that's the reason why the thumb has no finger. So the thumb has 2. That one has 1 alone and the extension to the toe. And that one has also its own one and the extension to the toe. But they 2, they don't have an individual tendon. They're just movable with. So these 4 all have 1 tendon, the extension to the toe, all 4. And these 2 don't have an additional. So that's why these 2 are so similar and less movable. So when I say want, disease, want, disease, ignorance, squalor, idleness. Want, disease, squalor, ignorance, idleness. Ignorance. Then it pops up because you have to make so much pressure to keep it in because the 3rd and 4th are so similar. You can't move them so individually. So if you're saying want, disease, squalor, idleness, then it pops out like an idleness. Like idleness. So want, disease, idleness, squalor, and something like that. Want, disease, idleness, squalor, and ignorance. Having a little over a minute left. What now? Cleveland leave a prime minister. I found out what a barista is. Someone said it. It's someone working in a bar, what was my assumption? So who was it? Cleveland Lee. He became a barista. He studied at Oxford and then he became a barista. So want, disease, squalor, idleness, and ignorance. What else? We got to do with 6 wives again. But first we're doing the 6 points, which the charters wanted in the 1830s and 40s. Every man in every region has every year the secret right to vote secretly and to be voted for and get paid. And of the 6 wives, they are divorced, killed, died, divorced, killed, survived. Catherine of Aragon, Anne Boleyn, Jane Seymour, Anne of Cleves, Catherine Howard, and Catherine Parr. Now we're having just 7 seconds, so we're just waiting. And that's it. And we don't have much time left, so we're not going to do anything anymore. I thank you very much, and until next time.